Hello everyone, my name is USS Gordon Captain, also known as USS Gordon Captain, and welcome to another Star Wars Destiny video.
Glad to have you, Cash. It's me again, Slide99, aka No Brainer, and we are back to discuss the neutral character Hondo, the plots, and the battlefields.
Yeah, so not much to say about Hondo. It's noteworthy that this video is recorded after Portland Regionals, so Hondo did win Portland Regionals, so we're going to be a little bit tainted by that.
Absolutely. For those of you who don't know, Hondo just managed to win the regional with a Hondo deck that relied on Planetary Uprising, Cunning, Canto Blight Pistol, and other cards like that to just do a ton of damage with specials and claim with the Emperor's Throne Room, because of course the top decks are using Emperor's Throne Room still. That battlefield is still incredibly busted, and we do not have other battlefields in the set nearly so much. The other notable mention for Hondo was a top 4 Yoda Hondo deck that only lost to the Hondo, although both players were Agent of Zion, who lost to Jason SW Guy, who are both incredibly good players, highly active in the Discord. So they played it well. And also, more thing to mention is that, of course, it was a regional, so they did not have access to the rival set, which has cards like Entangle and Hidden Motive, which do hurt this deck quite a bit. So I actually don't think it is going to remain the dominant meta card, and I am giving it only a 4-star in Standard.
By that tournament. I am also giving it a 4-star in Standard, although I'm also giving it a 5-star in Trilogies, because Hondo is a really good deck in Trilogies, and there aren't that many good decks in Trilogies.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna have to agree with you there. If you just want to do 3 damage a turn, that's a great one, and there are plenty of high cost cards in Legacies already that you can use the extra resources you get from Hondo as a result. It's a really good special at the end of the day. It's a 1 disrupt and 1 resource, or a 3 damage, and those are all really, really good sides.
It's worth noting, this character is really bad in the late game, because in the late game, obviously, you have more resources and you have things to do them with. Whereas in the early game, this character is really good with fast hands, because it's a 2 disrupt side. You can 2 disrupt somebody right off the bat before they can do anything, and then use your special to deal 3 damage, and that's really powerful. A really big swing. However, it is also noteworthy with Hondo that Hondo is going to be worse as time goes on, because we're going to get better and better at playing around his special and having decks that have lower cost curves. So a deck I'm playing casually, Luke Finn, which is this stupid casual deck. Cost curve of 12 0 cost cards, 12 1 cost cards, and 6 2 cost cards with 2 rearm and 2 logistics. So I never have any difficulty paying for Hondo's special. Then I've played Anakin Skywalker Kylo 2, also had no trouble with that, because the deck was 20 0 cost cards, 6 Force Powers, 2 Balance Ambition, and 2 Rise Again. And yeah, I couldn't pay for Rise Again, but I could do all my other things.
Correct. Similarly, my experimental APR Aealia Partisan Ray has also had no trouble against the players I've been playing against on the TTS. But I've only ever played against the Yoda Hondo version, and that version was seriously suffering in removal and late game ability to deal with my mass melee dice spam. Whereas this Hondo with the access to Planetary Uprisings, it perhaps could have gone better into the late game and potentially won, so I can't say for certain. But there are definitely counters out there.
It's also noteworthy that Cunning, which is a card that the Hondo deck is really reliant on.
I'm sorry, what card was that?
Cunning.
Yes.
It's most important part about it is that its special allows you to use a special on any of your character dice, or any special in play. There aren't actually that many specials in the Hondo deck to trigger off of that are good.
Exactly.
So you have Poe himself and Hondo himself, which is actually quite good. Sometimes Canto Blight Pistol was the one that the Hondo player did. Another guy uses Camouflage Rifle, I saw, which is deal 2 damage. If you control the battlefield, deal 3 damage instead. Noteworthy if you claim Emperor's Throne Room using that special, you actually do 3 damage, even if
Yep,
you didn't control the
strong.
battlefield before. That's just a noteworthy interaction. Is that there aren't actually that many specials that trigger off of that you can trigger cunning with in the Hondo deck, other than Canto Blight Pistol. There are definitely major weaknesses of the deck, and
Exactly. No, go ahead.
that's the reason why we're giving this card a 4-star rating rather than a 5-star rating.
Yes, exactly. And specifically, if you're playing a deck that doesn't run specials, I know, shock horror, a deck that doesn't run specials in Legacies when you've got Yodas and Poes and such. But yeah, if you have a deck that doesn't run specials, Cunning is a lot weaker. This Hondo Poe deck specifically really wants their opponents to be playing Libos.
Or Force Throw, as we saw in the top cut.
Yep, Force Throw is also incredibly strong. Alright, well, that is the final character that we have had to cover in this set. But we also have plots and battlefields, and plots are cards that use character points, so in a way you can say they're sort of like characters. No, not really. But they are just nice little things you can use to spice up those character decks if you don't quite have enough points. But very generally, you're going to want to have to actually play the full 30 points instead of using these plots. So with that accordingly, and the fact that most plots won't see too much competitive play that they'll be like required for a deck, it can be a bit difficult somewhat to evaluate those plots, and I think that is most easily shown with espionage, which is the one cost plot that we have access to. And I find this difficult to rate because either A, you're running a 29 card point deck, in which case you're using it, or B, you're not using it because you don't run a 29 card deck.
Or C, you run a damage deck and you don't play a espionage because you're playing Sayota, say, and you don't want to discard the top card with your deck.
I mean, sure, you could argue that, but discarding the top card of the deck is really good against Force Illusion. Like every little counts when it comes to that. So it's one of those things. If you're specifically not playing Force Illusion, you should be playing this card if you can. There's just no doubt about it in my mind.
Sure,
But
but I was saying that
what
you're
top cut?
playing Sayota.
Yeah,
You're playing
what
Sayota, and therefore you have Force Illusion and Scavenge in your deck already, so you don't
right?
want to.
What card, honestly? What deck, honestly, is not going to play Force Illusion at the top cut? Although I will say for Soul Yoda specifically, it has Scavenge synergy as well.
Okay. Besides that,
Yeah,
just a general rule about plots. Plots are not good cards.
no,
Plots aren't good at all. Your deck has to be good with sufficiently good that without the plot, that deck would be tier 1. And then the plot pushes them over the edge. It is not the case that the plot itself makes the deck good. The plot has to make the characters go from tier 1 to tier 2. No. Plots make the character a little bit better, but they have to already be good in order for the plot to make any sense.
exactly. So, is there a point to giving this one a star rating? Do we just say it's all 1 star remove?
I would say every plot is 1 star, except would like to note that some of the 2-cost plots have actual value associated
Yes,
with them.
exactly. You don't necessarily be wanting to play plots. The second plot, that was the only 1 cost plot. The next plot on the list is Fortify, which, okay, there is actually some merit to this. There is not an image for Fortify on Star Wars Destiny DB. Well, guys, you get to look at where the image would be in Star Wars Destiny DB. You see this button? This button says write a review. You should go over to where Fortify should be in Star Wars Destiny DB and write a review in complaint. But what Fortify does is that after setup, you give a character 1 shield, and it costs 2. Palpatine should be playing this, otherwise I don't think this is a good card.
So I give this card a 1 star in best of 1 tournaments and a 5 star in best of 3 tournaments.
Okay.
So Poe Yoda, Yoda Hondo, weird. Palpatine will all be playing this card, but those decks are obviously good on their own, and then sort of Fortify gives them an extra hit point no matter. Just gives them extra HP.
Alright, look. You have to compare this with all the other plots, however, and but it is kind of just the best two cost plot, honestly. There's a few notable exceptions, but otherwise you're just going to be playing this if you have a 28 character deck.
All right, we'll talk about the next plots, and I'll tell you why I think this card is a 2-star or 1-star card in best of 1 tournaments.
Okay. Oh my god, there's no image for Preemptive Strike. There's no image for the plots in Stars Destiny DB. Oh well. You guys have to take our word for it, what they do.
Preemptive Strike says, after setup, deal 2 indirect damage to an opponent.
And it costs 3.
Yes.
This
This
awful.
card is a 1-star card and will not see play.
This is an awful card. Never gonna see play. But hey, no, wait. Okay, we're not giving it credit. Okay, so you play a triple Jeddah Partisan deck, and then at the start of the game they have to discard 3 cards from the top of the deck. Does that sound overpowered to you?
Nope.
Exactly, this card is shit. Let's move on. We have the actual good 3-cost card plot right now, Profitable Connection, which does have a card art. So yes, Star Wars Destiny DB does know, in fact, which is the most important plot of the set. 3 cost, you start the game with 1 additional resource. This can make...
This is a 2-star card because there aren't 27-point cards that are good. Decks that are good.
Yeah, this can actually make a deck work better. This is one of those cards where you potentially want to, if you was thinking of running a 28 cost deck, maybe wanting to move down to a 27 if possible to get this, because additional resource is pretty good early on, but at the same time...
I'd much rather play Fortify in a 28-point deck if 28th point is better.
Exactly. I mean, it depends. I don't know. Maybe if you had some sort of deck where you could swap out a Padawan for no, that doesn't even work because Padawan's effectively gives you an extra resource at start. Anyway, moving on. let's not talk about that because plots they're just plots.
Stolen Intel. After setup, draw a card. This is a 2-star card. There is one deck I can see that there's one way I can play this card, and that is the Sith Holocron decks.
Okay, so this is where I'm gonna have to go against you here. I consider this a 3-star card. Because there is one deck I know for a fact runs this and uses this plot very well, and that is Yoda Wedge.
Oh, maybe.
That mythical deck that I was talking about. Yoda Wedge uses this card well because it has cards, so many cards like Rally Aid and such, that on turn 1 they put down all of their ramp cards and they just have no cards in their hand to ramp into. So this really helps them with that issue. They want to be drawing a lot of cards in turn 1 so that they can use the ramp that they've mulliganed for.
Maybe that's a reasonable deck. Yoda Wedge? Okay, sure. I can see it. But I'm not so convinced that Yoda Wedge is tier 2. But we'll see.
We'll see. Other than that, yeah, you just want Fortify. And Taking Ground, finally, the last plot. And this plot can cause some controversy because a lot of people were hyped for this plot when it first came out. I know for a fact Agent of Zion, for example, really loved the idea of this plot. I don't see that personally.
So, I opened a bunch of calculators and spent literally 7 hours doing math on this.
Jesus.
So, let's start with the basics.
Okay.
The best case scenario, this plot, is that it improves your win percentage on the battlefield roll-off by 40 percentage points. And it's important that I'm using the metric of percentage points rather than percent, because if you assume the roll-off to have a certain value, it's most important to look at the percentage point improvement rather than the percentage improvement.
What does that mean? Explain like I'm 5.
Okay. So when you go from 30% to 60%, that is a 100% improvement, but a 30 percentage point improvement.
Okay, so this is an absolute value improvement. Okay.
Yes. So then you assign a ceiling value to the roll-off. This ceiling is defined by you assign a value to the roll off with a ceiling of the roll off about 4 because you want to take shields and maybe the roll off is worth maybe your battlefield is exactly as bad as their battlefield, so you want 2 shields, and the floor is somewhere around 0,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere floating around 0. So
Yep.
if you take these two numbers together, this plot on best case scenario is worth 1.6 shields on expected.
Okay.
In in uh in best of 3, this plot is bad because on expectation you get 1.6 shields on game 1, and
And
then on
then
game
nothing.
2 you get 0 shields. On game 3 you also get 0 shields.
Yep, because the
Worst plot.
losers are able to choose the battlefields in games 2 and 3.
So
So
do
is
not play this plot in best of 3 tournaments.
so is that why you have Fortify as much more valuable in best of 3 tournaments?
Yes. So
Okay.
then, finally, slower decks versus fast decks. A fast deck has less value in taking shields than a slow deck. A slow deck, like say Phasma Ball Trooper, or
Okay.
some slow deck, 4 wide, they will have a really terrible battlefield.
Okay.
So then all terrible battlefields are like equivalently crappy. So and on top of that, the 1 tempo you get for being the battlefield controller matters the least. So for slow decks, taking ground is closest to a value of 4. Like say old school Po Maz or the Po Hondo deck or the Po Yoda deck, for instance. Let's go with Po Yoda. Yoda Hondo, which did make top cut and played Fortify. Better to play Fortify in that deck because the value for winning the roll off is lower would be for a slow deck, since tempo matters in fast versus fast. And then in fast versus slow, having a better battlefield is really important because you're always going to be claiming, so you want the most powerful battlefield possible.
Mm-hmm.
And in fast versus fast, having same the tempo is extremely important, and also fast battlefields tend to be beneficial for one side and not the other.
Mm-hmm.
So in slow decks, this is good. In fast decks, play Fortify.
Yep, makes complete sense there. You just if your battlefield's terrible, you want to make sure that your opponent's playing on that battlefield.
On their battlefield because you want to take shields.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. All right, so those are the plots. Honestly, I'm not too thrilled with that list. I was very excited when plots were announced as a thing, but I mean, we haven't got anything game changing yet, right? We've just got a couple of nice little additions, which are definitely needed. And I hope that they try and push the envelope and make these plots a little bit better and more interesting to make this more of a choice instead of just, oh, you're running 2 cards, you're running 28 points, take a Fortify. You're running 29, discard the top. But now we have access. Now we are reviewing the battlefields, and there are 7 battlefields to go through, and these have images, but the images are cropped in such a way that you've got half of a white bar. So I'm going to try and fix this I'm trying to try and fix this live right now whilst Golden Captain talks us through Arid Wasteland.
So I'm going to talk to you about battlefields in general. The fundamental rule of battlefields is there's a bimodal distribution of battlefields to see play. The
That is a
really,
large
really bad
word.
battlefields see. What?
Bimodal, that
Yeah.
is a large word.
Man, I use. Okay. So, the really, really bad battlefield see play because a slow deck will play a really, really bad battlefield. So, a battlefield like Secret Facility Scarab, really, really bad, sees play.
Mm-hmm.
A really, really powerful battlefield see play. An example of this would be Emperor's Throne Room. Really powerful, does a lot of things. Medium power level battlefields do not see play because a medium power level battlefield is not crappy enough to be a bad battlefield, and not good enough to be a broken battlefield. That middle ground, 1 star.
Yep. You just don't need to play. You don't need to play a deck that. You don't need to play a deck that is there. You don't need to play a battlefield when it's not bad or good, as Gordon Captain says. And a lot of these battlefields you're going to find are neither bad nor good. So a lot of these are not going to see play. Citadel Landing Zone doesn't have an image. God damn it. This is claim reroll any number of your dice, then you may resolve one of your dice. Now in draft, this is a horrifying battlefield to play against, as I learnt with my Jar Jar draft. Jar Jar Sealed, should I say? But in general, no one's playing this battlefield, are they?
This battlefield is decent, and therefore it won't see play because it's centrally located in the battlefield strength spectrum.
Exactly. I mean, theoretically, if you have a lot of dice that might not be that you might want to claim to try and resolve first, you're probably going to take the battlefield in the Rivals pack, which is remove one of your dice to deal one unblockable damage to a player. You're just not play.
Yeah.
That's just straight up better than this, really.
Yep, I agree.
We have Imperial Palace, which doesn't have an image again. Claim, look at the opponent's hand and discard a card from it. Now, this is actually kind of interesting in some ways if you compare it to War-Torn Streets. In that War-Torn Streets is a random card, this one allows you to look at your opponent's hand. However, your opponent's hand fluctuates very wildly. Your opponent is likely to play almost all of the cards in their hand or discard almost all the cards in their hand. So the value of knowing their hand is much, much, much weaker after you've played this battlefield. It does allow you to discard the most powerful card in it, so it would have been useful if Heat of Battle wasn't errated and was still a really powerful card. But in general, if you are a mill deck, you want to be playing War-Torn Streets because you don't care as much about what card you remove from your opponent, but you also want to hold on to those key combo cards like, say, a Hyperspace Jump. You don't want those to go away. So you'd rather take the random chance if your opponent decides to go for a claim instead of you. So this isn't good enough for mill decks, and I don't think any other deck wants to play it.
And I don't think it's good enough in mill decks because mill decks would rather play Medical Center anyway.
Well, some would. APR wouldn't.
Fair, but mill decks that are villain, which means mill decks that are good, except for the Recon deck, which actually might play this card.
I don't want to say this as an objective fact, but my opinion is that Hero Mill is in a better place than Villain Mill right now.
Okay, maybe you're right. I really like lying in wait and buyouts.
They're really good cards. They're really good cards, but unless we're going to see something like a Jabba Hondo, my kind of scum deck, which we were talking about in the stream for the Portland Regionals, unless it's something like that, I don't see Villain Mill going to be a thing this set.
Okay, launch deck.
Again, no image. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Unfortunately, it's basically a podcast because we're not seeing any images and I'm not bothering to put up any stars because they're all ones. Remove one of your dice to deal indirect damage to an opponent equal to half of the value showing on it, rounded up.
So this might see play in trilogies as the crappiest battlefield. I'm not sure if this is the worst battlefield. There might be. I think there's actually a worse battlefield in like a Rivals pack or something. But this is pretty bad. So 1 star.
So there is one place I can see this being useful, other than in trilogies, and that is specifically with Jeddah Partisan. So there's an interesting thing with Jeddah Partisan in which none of the battlefields discard from your opponent's deck. Now you may be thinking to yourself, oh, hang on, what about what was it, Command Center? No, that causes your opponent to discard from their deck. So that doesn't work on Scrap Heap, which gets you a resource whenever you discard the top of the opponent's deck. However, if you remove a blank to deal 0 indirect damage to your opponent, you have dealt damage to proc Jeddah, which procs your Scrap Heap.
I didn't realize the interaction worked that way.
Yep.
Okay.
That is the one thing I can see about it. It could potentially get you a resource if you're playing Scrap Heap.
All right, the one useful but notable battlefield in the set, Outer Rim Outpost, and it has a picture of 3PO lazing around.
Yes, we actually have a picture of this one because the Stars Destiny DB guy likes gold apparently.
Claim, gain a resource, draw a card. Most important effect, part of this effect is that it's slightly better than Moisture Farm. Moisture Farm has been in competitive battlefield in decks without synergistic
Hmm.
other battlefields, so this is a 5-star card.
This is a great card. I mean, sometimes you can argue that drawing a card is detrimental to your own strategy when you are playing against a mill deck, but outside of that, situation, you're just going to be playing this over Moisture Farm, and as you've said, Moisture Farm sees play.
Petraki Arena. Claim, deal 1 indirect damage to yourself, then deal 1 unblockable damage to a character. I think this is worse than Outer Post. Too powerful compared to a couple of the battlefields we've seen before, so it won't see play in trilogies once.
Okay. Now, one thing I do like about Petranki Arena is that if there is a deck that can use this, it'll be very happy for it. Dealing an indirect damage to yourself, well, okay, it does proc Dr. Aphra, but it's also something your opponent, if you're an aggro deck, your opponent generally doesn't want to do to themselves, so they just won't use the battlefield. So it's a blank battlefield for them, but it's not necessarily a blank battlefield for you. Which could make it see potential play in an aggro deck that's okay with taking damage in order to deal unblockable damage, because otherwise you have, what is it, the Separatist base, is it? That's just straight up claim dealing unblockable damage to an opponent.
Okay, sure.
That's the only thing I can see it in. But it would be fun to try it. So fun factor, I have this one fairly high, but no, it's not good. And finally, the Power Generator Trench, which also has no image. Claim, turn a die to any side.
Like every other card ever, like every other battlefield in the set, too powerful to see play in slow decks, too crappy to see play in good decks, 1-star. In fast decks, sorry, 1-star.
Yeah, turning a die is some nice soft removal at times, but it's not. It's enough that it will disrupt your opponent, so in turn, it's enough for your opponent to disrupt you if you're playing this in a slow deck. So you can't play it really. So again, 1-star. And that is Hondo, the plots, and the battlefields. Honestly, plots wise, I'm not all that impressed, but I'm excited for the mechanic. Battlefields wise, we've got a lot of not playable battlefields.
Yeah, it was a pretty bad lotto. Join us next time where we talk about hero dice and non-dice deck
Yes,
list
hero
cards.
cards.